Hi, everybody. MITRE CVE here. Thanks for joining me today for the security news update. First, before I do that, I want to tell you about, we have a AI piece of our business, and we've developed an AI-based version of this particular podcast. If you go to our YouTube channel and look for CyberPulse there, you'll see a completely AI-based version of this podcast. It's an interview with me by two AIs. Pretty impressive. We can do that work for you on a whole variety of different purposes, functions. So if that's something that's of interest to you, then please reach out to us. First, in the Security and Privacy Alerts Department, Apple fixes 2 0 days that are being used in what they're calling an extremely sophisticated attack. Apple's always very closed-mouthed about what's going on, but whatever, they are saying that these are being used in the wild. They do have patches. One bug was found by Google. The other bug was found by Apple. You may have noticed if you deployed the April patches that there is a folder called I-netpub on your C drive. If you're not running a web server, not running IIS, then you'd probably be inclined to go delete that. Don't. It is a kludgy hack fix to a privilege elevation attack that Microsoft is, I guess they're working on a real fix, but just leave it there. It doesn't hurt anything, and it does solve a problem. If you were a very tidy individual and you've already deleted that folder, Microsoft has a way to get it back. So, and you can't just recreate it. You just can't do a create folder. That won't work. So anyway, hopefully you didn't delete it. And just to make sure everybody's having fun, if you're running Windows 11 24H2, which is the current version, the April patches are causing blue screen to death on some machines. Hopefully you back up your machine, so at least if it dies and you have to reload Windows, you haven't lost any data. But on the other hand, there is a way to go fix this. For consumer versions of Windows, it's pretty straightforward. For business versions of Windows, a little bit more complicated. In the CMMC Q&A section today, a question came up, which is interesting, is who's responsible for making sure that your subcontractors remain compliant with CMMC during the entire length of a contract? Now, obviously, there's an answer here which nobody's going to like, which is everyone. But that is the reality of it, right? The sub is responsible for making sure they stay compliant, because if they're not compliant, then they're committing fraud. And if the prime doesn't make sure that they are making sure that their subs remain compliant, then they're committing fraud. So, and there's a lot of different reasons why you might not be, have your CMMC certification current. So definitely worth considering about how you're going to go do that. In the reference department, here's a kind of a riddle. When is a crypto coin not a speculative security? That the feds have considered crypto speculative because that's why the people that aren't trying to commit fraud, that's why they buy it, right? They think they can buy it for $1 and sell it for $100, and that's a good thing. Well, if that's an option with your crypto, then it is a security. On the other hand, if it does things like it's tied to $1 and it's backed by collateral and stuff like that, well, then maybe it's not a security. But the feds have put up a whole explanation of when is this thing a security, and therefore have to be registered, and when is it not. In the important issues department, researchers have found out, and this is actually, researchers are the researchers at Lookout Security, which makes mobile device security software. They discovered that they blocked phishing attacks on 26% of iOS devices, but only 12% of Android devices. And you can probably have a whole bunch of reasons why you might think, like, well, nobody important uses Android devices or whatever, right? But nonetheless, if you use an iOS device, and you're twice as likely, more than twice as likely to be phished. So, and that doesn't mean that those phishing attacks are successful. It just means that you're a target. So that probably means if you're an iPhone user, you probably ought to pay a little bit more attention to it. MITRE almost the way I originally wrote this, MITRE lost the funding to run the Common Vulnerability Enumeration Database. That's the place where researchers and even NIST catalogs known security vulnerabilities. That funding was scheduled to run out last Wednesday at about 11 p.m. on Wednesday night. DHS said, "Oh yeah, I think we'll extend this for another, not quite a year, 11 months." Don't know why they picked 11 months, but they did. And the reason why this is important is that security vendors, amongst others, use these databases to modify their code to go off and detect newly detected vulnerabilities. In the legal department, a federal judge, not surprisingly, struck down an Ohio social media law, and he called it constitutionally infirm. That's pretty creative. The law was set to take effect in January of 2024, so that's a while ago. It would have required social media companies and gaming apps somehow magically to figure out who was your parent, how old you were, and get their permission. It's like, this is beyond, I understand the logic behind it, right? So, I mean, from, if you're a politician and you're trying to appeal to parents and say, well, look, we're working hard to keep the bad guys at bay. I understand why you'd want to go do that. But the reality is it's impossible for these companies to actually do this. I mean, how would somebody know whether I am 60 or 16? That's number one. And unless you're going to go off and say, as part of this, everybody has to produce a government issued ID in order to log on to the internet, which of course, that by itself, unconstitutional according to our folks in black. So it's messy. And there are similar laws in California, Arkansas, and Utah. All of those have been at least temporarily enjoined. This will wind up going up to the Supreme Court by the time it's done. We have no clue. But the answer is, what we do know is that a lot of lawyers will become pretty rich and be able to afford their next Mercedes or Lamborghini, depending on how expensive they are. And my guess is these laws will be overturned, but that's just my speculation. People are questioning whether we will see a new wave of white-collar crime. Now, white-collar crime has always been hard to go off and both detect and prevent. But, what we have had historically is that the feds have been pretty diligent about trying to root it out and prosecute it. Well, as the feds shrink and, change their priorities or whatever, apparently white-collar crime is not a priority anymore. And so, my guess is that that crooks, white-collar crooks, will say they'll feel bolder to go off and do these attacks because the odds of the U.S. feds going after them is going down, maybe. Under education, the cybercrime ramps up. The question becomes, well, what do regulators expect of you? And it used to be, if you had a written information security program, it's the antivirus software, and maybe you did a little bit of training, all was good. Well, now the regulators have stepped that up and they're asking for a lot more. Now, let's assume that you're not in a regulated industry. That does not mean that what they're asking is irrelevant. What it means is they can't force you to go do it. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go do it, because nothing that they're asking for is ridiculous. So you might want to look at that and see whether you're doing all those things. And if you're not, you might want to consider them. In the breaches department, the MITRE token price collapsed by 90% in just a matter of hours. Cause of this is unknown. It's not thought to be hackers, but it shrunk the market cap of the token by about $5 billion. That means that if you didn't catch this and didn't sell your tokens, assuming you could find someone to buy them, while this thing was doing a death spiral, 90% of your money is gone. And since it wasn't a hack, and I don't think anybody's going to come to your rescue. So hopefully the money wasn't very important to you if you did, in fact, have some money invested in that. Hertz has begun notifying customers of a breach from last year. I love this timely notification part. Data includes names, dates of birth, contact information, driver's license, payment card information, workers' compensation claims, and other stuff. So all good stuff if you're trying to do a phishing campaign. And it also affects Hertz's other brands, Dollar and Thrifty. And lastly, in the hacks department, the hacker firm BidenCash dumped almost 1,910,000 stolen credit cards on a Russian hacker firm. Interestingly enough, they have card numbers and CVV codes and expiration dates, which is kind of mostly what you need to use the card, except it doesn't have names. So that makes them kind of worth a lot less. Feds announced another settlement of a defense contractor who lied about their cybersecurity preparedness. It is a crime. And there's a law that goes back to the Civil War called the False Claims Act, which they go after people with. In this particular case, this is a relatively small company, 150 people, and they fined them $4.6 million plus interest with legal fees, plus some other stuff. So it'll be, I'm sure, well over $5 million by the time they're done, which is a lot of money for a 150-person company. Out of that, the whistleblower will walk away with nearly $1 million, plus having his legal fees paid. And now he's kind of on a speaking tour. So he's doing just peachy keen, I think. And that's obviously a great incentive for other people to go off and rat you out if you're not doing what you need to be doing. So just a word to the wise. It's a question about whether this is the new normal. The European Commission is being kind of cagey about this, I'm sure, for politics, but they admitted that they are giving burner phones and burner laptops to their high-level officials who are about to travel to the United States for meetings. Well, I assume that means that they don't particularly trust the United States, which is not comforting, given we all live in the United States, but that's what they're doing. And then the question becomes, what are you doing when your executives travel internationally? Florida is considering a bill that would require a company, big tech, to insert encryption backdoors. Now, there's a lot of other countries that are trying to get this done. Nobody's been willing to do it yet. And none of these bills have gotten passed, but it doesn't mean they're not trying. In fact, the government has been trying to get rid of encryption since the 1990s. The U.S. government seems to be a little bit smarter about that now, realizing that the odds of them keeping this secret is about zero. Recently, we saw that the Fed's wiretap database was hacked and all the data in it was compromised. So, I understand what they're trying to do. This will, I'm sure, wind up at the Supreme Court to be determined as to what they do and whether they're issuing stays. These days, they're a bit unclear as to exactly what they might do. And then the news bites for this week, consider work from home, which everybody does, security considerations. There's some things that you really ought to think about because the protections that you have when you're in the office don't exist at home. Change Healthcare. Remember, they had this massive hack last year. They're now pressuring doctors into repaying loans that the feds forced them to give to doctors when they decided they weren't going to pay any claims because their systems melted down into a puddle of soup. And so they're getting a lot of bad press over that. I am sure that the lawyers will intervene there. 4chan, which is I would think politely called an internet cesspool, went down this week due to hacking. It's not clear that it's ever going to come back up because of what was stolen and how it was stolen, how it was publicized. So assuming it doesn't come back up, in my opinion, that's a good thing. Chris Krebs, the former director of CISA, who was appointed by President Trump in his first term, is now being targeted by President Trump because he doesn't like him. And he revoked his security clearance and also the security clearances of the company that he was working for. So he quit. And he's going to go fight the battle by himself, which is fine because I'm sure he will get lots of people who will contribute money to him because of the polarization of the political spectrum. And the weaponization of the Justice Department that he was so hell-bent against apparently continues. Sweden has decided that one of the ships that they were holding after it snagged a fiber internet cable undersea. They said because of the limited access they had to the crew and the data and the black boxes and stuff, they can't really tell for sure whether it was sabotage or an accident. But 3 cables or 3 sets of cables in a couple months in the same area of the ocean that happens to be real close to Russia seems more than a bit coincidental. Just saying. So, with that, that's all I have for today. If you have questions or something we can help you with, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to assist you. And until next time, stay safe. Thanks for listening.